Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And today, dun, 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 we have the president. My increasingly good friend, Aimee Tinkler's here, who, if you don't know, and she'll introduce herself in a moment, has president in her title. How cool
I do,
is that?
yeah.
So
Yeah,
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It is pretty cool, but also very terrifying. And I never use it, obviously, because it has other connotations, doesn't it, President? And I don't really
does nowadays.
Earn it. But yes, it's a very grand title, and actually the academic robes that go with it are even grander.
Oh, I've never even heard of this. Well, maybe we'll get into that. Well, so for people that don't know why that's in your title, tell people a bit about what your current role is.
Sure. So my current role is my paid role is that I am Director of Education at Odyssey Collaborative Trust. I'm a primary teacher by background. Definitely very much think of myself as primary. My background in school was as a small school head in a tiny school in Derbyshire. And then one of my unpaid roles is that I work really closely with the Chartered College of Teaching. This is super exciting. I am so proud of this work. So basically that came about because right at the very beginning, when there was a sense that we were going to have a chartered college, and I think it was, well, it was definitely a DFE partly initiative at the beginning. They advertised for some people to join the board.
Right.
Super exciting. At that time, I was a classroom teacher. That was 10 years ago. I applied to join the board. Slightly trickily, my head teacher at the time also did, and he didn't get it.
Oh,
It was interesting. Yeah. So, but I applied to join the board and I had an interview with Alison. All pretty nerve-wracking because at that time, I didn't know anything about much outside of Derbyshire. And then we went from there. So I was on the board. I eventually became vice president and I was nominated as president-elect. And then I became president. It's pretty joyful because I was voted in by the profession twice. Voted in by your peers feels pretty cool. So yeah, it's been quite joyful work. And in January next year, when I finish my term as president, I'll also have been involved with the college for 10 years. Really from the very beginning, from the kind of what sort of paper shall we choose for the journal time. So it's been a huge, enormous privilege.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Well, give people a bit more of a kind of, what was your subject specialism in primary? Did you have one?
No, not really. Definitely, well, primary teachers are generalists.
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably my specialism, if there's anything like that in primary, was that I taught and led in a very, very small school. So in my class, I had reception year 1 and year 2 all the time. And sometimes year 3 and 4 as well. And I taught them all together. So the small school thing was really my thing. It's really my thing. So yeah, that was really my thing to start off with. I started my teaching career in very, very challenging inner city schools. I was on something that existed then, which sounds very cool. It was called the Fast Track Teacher Program.
Oh.
Yeah, it sounds cool, doesn't it? So I was on that, which meant essentially you went from school to school that was in special measures and helped in that school as a classroom teacher or as a senior leader. So yeah, I don't really have a specialism. I don't think primary is my specialism. Because of the book and because of my work in small schools, I think lots of people know that I do a lot of small school work. Although my trust at the moment, I don't have any small schools. They're all city schools.
Oh, interesting.
They're all reasonably big. So
yeah, brilliant. Well, let's get cracking and learn a bit more about you then as a person. For those people that are new to the podcast, we have a kind of series of set elements really that make up the flow of it, and the guests get to choose those ahead of time. And the first one is something we call a fast friends question. And these are some questions that some researchers created to try to connect connection between people as quickly as possible. And the first one that Aimee chose is, what is your most treasured memory? So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so this is a super cool question. I've thought about it really carefully. I had a few, but I'm going to tell you the education one.
Oh, okay.
So in my school, where I was head of school, actually, we had 27 children in the whole school at one point. And the numbers went up, but it was, all good. But I have got 3 of my own children. Now, if you've only got 27 children in your school, 3 makes a significant difference to your budget, right?
Yeah.
But apart from that, it It was literally just up the road, but such a gorgeous school. We were doing such fabulous, brilliant things for the children in the community there that when I had my third child and went back after maternity leave, I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to move them to school with me.
Oh, nice.
So I moved all the children to school with me, 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl. The eldest is now 19, so they're like, it was some time ago. Helped the budget, great. Also meant that I had to teach my own children.
Right.
Mostly great. Great. Apart from, they've got those stories like, Mum, you did that thing to me in assembly, that kind
of course.
But at the end of my eldest leaving school, we had school photos. You get all the brothers and sisters together. It's dead easy in a little small school. The photographer I knew, like everybody knew each other. It was just a really lovely village school. He said to me, why don't you just get in this photo? Like, this is the last time you'll have all 3 of your children all at school with you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, do you know what? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Like thinking about them having exactly the education that I wanted them to have, which I didn't just do it for my children, I did it for all of the children in the school, but it was such a joyful, gorgeous school. Everything was about it was lovely. When we talk about belonging now, belonging as a buzzword now, 10 years ago, not such a buzzword, but it was like, we are genuinely a family team in this school, not just me and my family, but all of those children, all of those parents, and the impact the school had on the community, and the brilliant things we were able to offer those children was just totally joyful. So that photo now for me is like, it's all that. It's a different season in my life for sure, but it was definitely a gorgeous memory of that particular season.
I love that. Yeah. It's like you're homeschooling, but you haven't got you haven't got to sort of provide the location.
Pretty much that. And the flip side of it is, I always used to think, I'm sure, like, I'm not that good a teacher, and actually the parents do loads at home, and then you are the teacher. But luckily my children can all read and write, so it must be all right.
That must have been all right then. That's so funny. Wicked. Well, let's move on to the second bit of the podcast then. So again, if you're new to the podcast, the idea is that it's based around largely around the books that I wrote called the Leadership Launchpads, which are kind of like infographic driven, I guess, insights into leadership. And the guests get to choose 2 that resonate most with them. And then we talk through them. So I'm going to share my screen. So for those that are watching this on video, they can see what's happening. The first one that Aimee chose is called Hug Them and Hold Them. And when I was making it, I was thinking about this idea that we need to be nice, clearly, but we also need to keep our expectations high. And lots of times that means that there's a balance between kind of caring for people, but also challenging them. And I think for lots of us in leadership over time, you get a sense of potentially which one you lean more towards. But also, for me at least, as I've gone further into my career and I've become a bit more sort of secure in myself, I've sought out more challenge. Now I actively go looking for it because I've recognized quite, recently that is sort of where all the growth is. So I started thinking about, okay, what does it mean then if we're going to say to a leader, you need to hug them more? And of course, we're not talking sort of physically hugging people, although that might be a thing. Empathy is the first thing, really. This idea that we have to kind of understand others' perspectives and acknowledge the challenges they've got, even if they're not things that we experience or even that we believe are challenges. I mean, if they're real for someone, then they're real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you've got this idea of trust. If we're going to care for people, then we need to trust them. And that doesn't mean that sort of wishy-washy, empty affirmation that I trust you. You have to really demonstrate that, so giving people more autonomy. When we say autonomy in this sense, we mean freedom, and just kind of trusting them enough not to be always on their shoulder. And then the last one, which is, a personal fascination of mine, is this idea of psychological safety. If we care for people, then we have to, model enough vulnerability and kind of fallibility that other people feel like is safe enough to repeat that, And so we care for them by creating an environment where they feel like they can admit errors or kind of challenge us. So then on the flip side, you've then got that challenge because in fact, before we go into that, I suppose it's worth mentioning. I mean, it's loosely linked, isn't it? The work that Kim Scott did on kind of radical candor.
Yep.
If you're not familiar with that, I recommend kind of googling it. But she talks a bit in one of her quadrants this idea of kind of ruinous empathy.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're too far on the caring side, then actually you can get to a point where you're not challenging people, and actually that's not very helpful. So if we go into the challenge side, I guess it starts with having high expectations. And again, that feels a bit like the trust thing, doesn't it? It sometimes can be a bit of an empty affirmation. I've got high expectations. Okay, well, what does that mean? And for me, it means kind of being really clear on what are, the boundaries, but also what does excellence look like? Making it really clear for people. This is, where we're all trying to get to. The other thing I put down was alignment. This idea that we need to challenge people if any thinking or behavior doesn't align with our core values and vision. For me, there's something not just forgivable, but actually kind of, we should encourage people to find innovative ways to get to certain places. But there are some things that we can't compromise on, like core values and the end product or the end goal. So there's something about making sure that whatever people do, there is an alignment. And then the last thing, it doesn't help if we don't kind of hold people to account. And it's funny actually that over time, I've kind of wanted more accountability, wanted to be pushed a little bit more, wanted to be stretched. And so that idea of kind of demanding ownership of projects, commitment to tasks, and you can do all of this stuff, of course, in the right way, but avoiding kind of excuses. And so the last thing that came to me when I was making this was this idea that you probably need to care in order to make the challenge possible, or certainly make it easier. I know that with relationships that I've really invested in caring, I can then do more challenging, which is interesting. Anyway, that was kind of what I was thinking when I made it, but why did it resonate with you?
I love this. This is the thing. Like, I can't imagine why everybody doesn't just choose this in every podcast. It is the thing. Just do this thing. Yeah. I think various levels, different levels. So the first thing that came into my head when I read it, and I love the book, it's just exactly how I want to take in information. But the first thing that came into my head when I first read it was a very good friend of mine who has in the past had challenging, dealing with challenges in class with children that have got particular needs or particular behaviour or whatever it is, right. And dealing with challenging things like that. And that is like that. You've got to love them first. Yeah. Just love them first, and then you can, hold your expectations, but they've got to know you love them. And it works at every single level. And it definitely works at kind of a leadership level. So I would definitely have been the person who was, I would be like the poster girl for ruinous empathy in the past. Sure. Because it just feels really nice to tell people that they're really great all the time, doesn't it? It's like really easy. Yeah. But I think as I've developed as a leader, I've realised it's not fair to do that to people. Right. Maybe it was Kim Scott's work and reading that made me change. But it's not fair to just be nice to people. You've got to, if you know what good looks like, you've got to help people get to that. Yeah. So I just love the idea of those things come first. You have to have those things to get to that, and you really do, because otherwise you're just making people do stuff. And if you can bring people with you along the way and they want to do it and they know that they can be vulnerable with you and make mistakes and say, I don't understand, or I don't get it, or can you help me, or I can't cope with this right now, whatever it is, or I've got something going on in my life which has nothing to do with school, but I want to just tell you about it because I don't need you to do anything or lower your expectations because of it. I just want you to know that that's just a brilliant place to be. And it's at every level. Even in chartered college council meetings, I still caveat my phrases with, really sorry to ask the stupid question. And I think probably it models some vulnerability, but actually I'm kind of okay with that now.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, well, it opens a door for other people as well, doesn't it? Which is great. I was thinking about, again, lots of people listening to this, are looking for key takeaways and stuff. And one of the first ones might be people reflecting after listening to that on where they are on that continuum and whether they're too supportive or not enough challenging and that sort of thing. And someone the other day asked me about how I would go about being more challenging. And I said, well, one of the things that I do regularly now in coaching relationships is at the beginning of the relationship, in what we would call a contracting meeting, or even the first time that you sit down with a direct report, having a conversation around the need for both of those things, saying that, look, there'll be times when, absolutely I'm here to support you, but there will be times that I'm here to challenge you. And this will be why I'm doing it. And this is how I'll do it. You're almost kind of like, vaccination is a bit of a dirty word nowadays, but that idea of you're almost prepping people, aren't you, for it, so they understand that there will be a balance of those two things.
Yeah. And I think two things popped into my head. One is this idea, and we know we're all into codifying everything. The world is codified now, right? But and I think sometimes that's problematic. But what it does do is it shows you what good looks like.
Yeah.
Many ways, like in a leadership way, in a teaching and learning way, in a whatever way. And so that challenging people to get to that, it takes away the kind of like, it's not me personally that's saying what you're doing is not good. This is what we've agreed.
That's nice.
And there's another aspect of it, is that you need somebody who is, when you can think of the friend, I can think of the friend in my head who loves you, they've got your back, that they will tell you when you're making a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
Like, how valuable is that? That's
absolutely.
So if in a professional capacity we can be that for other people, then that's pretty joyful.
Brilliant. Well, that's great. Well, we're going to move on now to the next bit, which is the third element, which we'll repeat as we go through. But again, for those that are new to the podcast, we talk about these things called ignition points. And this idea that we're interested in, obviously the lives behind the leaders that we know so well. And we're interested in what shaped them. And this idea of maybe events or people that have made a big difference to them on their journey through this. And so the first one you wrote down, which is fascinating, is that you've got almost like a group of people in your head that have become almost key igniters or fire starters. There we go.
That's it.
If you're old enough, that will make some sense to you, what that fire starter.
Yeah,
you get some sort of dance music coming on there. But so tell us a bit about these people then and how they affected you.
Yeah, so this was a really hard question. Like, I was trying to think of, I don't have any like key points that have like changed the direction of my career really. Right. But then I thought, what's been really the things that have kind of pushed me on to do the things that I have done. And it's definitely the people along the way. So I was really, really lucky as a new teacher to have some great head teachers. And I didn't realise until later how great they were. So one head teacher in one of the schools that I worked in as part of this fast track teacher program, and it was a really, really challenging school in special measures. She said to me once, Aimee, can you just go to this meeting? I've been invited to this meeting in London. I booked a train ticket. I can't go. Just go, wear something smart. I was like, oh, okay. So it turned out I didn't really know what the meeting was. It was with government ministers. I remember Andrew Adonis was there. I don't remember much else about it. But the sense of the meeting was, we're going to do this thing where we think you could have one head teacher over two schools. We're going to call them executive heads.
Okay.
I actually think that's because there's not enough people who want to be head teachers. Isn't that what's going on here? And I didn't know who these people were. I was an ECT, NQT at the time. And this guy next to me said, I think it's about time we went to Swindon. That's where I worked. And then suddenly there was like all this government people in Swindon. It was all a big deal in the local authority. So she gave me opportunities. Yeah. I had no idea what I was doing. But she gave me opportunities and she just pushed me out there. Just go and do that. You can do that thing. Just don't worry about it. Just go. So that was pretty exciting. And that was a really good start to my career, really. And then, really nice. Really, really good. And then when I became kind of a leader, the people that I worked with very much were, you get some people who are just the sparks of they're just sparkly people. Yeah. So in a small school, part of the joy of being in a small school is you can make things happen really quickly. So I worked with a great lady called Liz, and she's actually the head of the school now, which is very joyful. And we used to think, after everyone had gone home from school, we'd think, oh, that was a bit tricky. What can we do to make this better? I know, let's do that. And by the time we came back in the morning, we'd have this 5-minute conversation that said, right, we're going to change this major system. Let's do it today. And you
Love
do
it.
that in small schools. Brilliant. So that was brilliant. She was another one. Jade Pierce is another one for sure.
Yep.
Absolute genius. Like I've never known anybody be able to distill really complicated research in a way that actually I can understand, which is pretty cool. And so we worked together in a trust for a short time, and she's definitely someone who has made me think differently about things. And sometimes I'll say to her, I don't believe in that thing, and she'll just say, no, I actually think you're wrong. There's various people along the way. I can tell you about more.
Just keep going. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's interesting that you got that balance, haven't you, of people that you're talking about, those head teachers, that they showed care for you by giving you the opportunity, but there was also an element of challenge in there.
For sure. I think
like a sweet spot.
Absolutely. And it is a sweet spot. And that's actually, I've not really thought about it like that actually before, but yeah, there definitely is that. And there's, I worked with a leader who I worked with in one of the trust roles I had. She was the director of education, Aimee, she was called, another Aimee. And she was that. She was exactly like, no, you can go and do this. You can do that. And I'd be like, oh, no, I'm not sure if I can. Alison Peacock is exactly the same. Right. She's absolutely the same. You could do that. Yep, absolutely. I'm like, okay, I probably can. Probably can. It's probably fine.
That's a really interesting, and I think that probably comes up quite a lot, which means it's so pivotal to a leader's role, is that they have to recognize the power they have to, I guess, empower people by giving them opportunity. And the belief that shows, doesn't it? God, that's fascinating.
Or maybe they just don't find anyone else to do the job.
Yeah, they don't want to, they're just too busy. They want to get rid of a job. Well, Aimee will do that. I was talking to someone the other day about, I think someone was asking about my career, and I said, I don't think there's some sort of secret committee that's behind the scenes thinks, can we have a Chris Baker update, please? Like, is he starting to kind of reach a plateau? Because it seems like that in my career, that every time I've, reached a little bit of almost like a motivational plateau where I've been in a role for 5-6 years, somebody seems to come along and say, hey, Chris, how'd you fancy doing this? We think you'd be really great for it. And I'm like, okay. And then suddenly I've got another 10 years of probably ADHD fueled passion and fire for it. But yeah, it feels like someone is definitely helping me out along the way.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. Although I did once go for a job interview, I didn't get the job, and they had it's for a lovely trust locally, and they had like a HR people do the values interview. Right. And in the values interview, the feedback to me was, you said you've been really lucky to be in. Like, I was lucky to get a place on the charter college council. Yeah. And then I was lucky, and she said, we're just not interested in like the luckiness. You should have talked about it like, I put myself here and I did this and then I got that. So yeah, I don't have that, but I think I'm okay with that now. I'm okay with just feeling lucky.
Yeah, yeah. And it is, that is, not to go a tiny bit off topic, but that talks back to, doesn't it, that idea of, for some people, you putting some of that stuff down to luck would make me feel more comfortable in your presence. And then for other people, that's seen as a negative. You can never really. Our best bet is just be ourselves, isn't it? And then be peaceful with the fact that will chime with some people and not chime with others.
Yeah.
But do we want to be with the people that it doesn't chime with anyway? So, yeah, you're right. Thanks. Interesting. All right, but let's keep pushing on. So we've got our second launch pad now, and this one is called. Great leaders amplify others. And it's along these themes of a bit like what you talked about there, leaders not just challenging, but supporting the development of other people. And so when I was writing this, I was kind of thinking about sort of when we look and kind of act outwards, it helps us to build trust and belonging. And I was thinking about the different ways that leaders can actually amplify others. And this speaks completely to what you said. And I wish I'd remembered that phrase, because that's quite nice, isn't it? Deliberate delegation. This idea of you're not just randomly picking someone to take things off your to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
You have deliberately chosen the task, and you've deliberately chosen the person.
Yeah.
And that gives them an opportunity they wouldn't have had before, and ultimately amplifies them. And so this idea that you have to kind of purposefully and gradually assign authority and ownership for tasks and kind of projects, at the same time acknowledging the risk of doing that, but also I've been reading a lot about delegation recently, and this idea that it's not abdication or
Mm-hmm.
kind of abandonment. There is
Like,
this sort of, right, I think you'd be great at this. Let's talk about what excellence looks like. Let's talk about what support you'll need. Let's talk about the first steps, and let's talk about how I can be in the background. That sort of idea. And so I was thinking about, this idea that we need to delegate authority as well as the task. So it's not just say, go do this and do it this way. There is some ownership around how it could be done. Goes back to the stretch and challenge. For leaders to see themselves as the kind of remover of roadblocks, really. This idea that once the task's in motion, our job is to get as much stuff out of the way of the people we've given the task as possible. And then if things don't go wrong, and they very well might not go wrong, this idea of locating the learning, because I think that does something. First of all, it protects the other person, but it also means that even if you do kind of fail, that there's some kind of benefit to it. Again, been listening to Amy Edmondson's The Right Kind of Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating about intelligent failure. So then I was thinking about other ways we could amplify leaders, and this idea of kind of, again, giving more visibility and voice. So again, it speaks to the things you were talking about, really. The greatest leaders I've looked at and worked with, I suppose, are quite keen to shift the spotlight. They're quite keen to redirect attention away from themselves and onto other people. They put other staff in the spotlight, and then they kind of, I guess, welcome the opinions and the ideas and the perspectives of other people. And so you're giving kind of weight to and a spotlight to that, which is fascinating. We've talked a lot in this podcast about this idea of modeling vulnerability and authenticity. For me, the other thing to think about is knowing your staff, because not everybody wants to be in the spotlight. Not everybody feels comfortable in the spotlight, or at least they're at different points in their progression into the spotlight, if that makes sense. Some people are happy just to be chucked straight in. For other people, that wouldn't be what they want to do. So this idea of connecting with people, trying to systematize. I'm obsessed with systems at the moment. This idea that you don't leave it to chance that you might give someone some feedback or celebrate. You actually put processes and stuff in. And of course, whenever we talk about praise, we've got to think about, the preciseness of it. Because again, some people will want it a certain way. Some people like public praise, some people don't like public praise, and all those sorts of things. And then the last way I've thought about, that leaders could amplify others is just by having a kind of what we'd call like a servant mindset. Servant leadership is a fairly well-known idea, but just this idea that at least in their heads, they have flipped the hierarchy. They may be the CEO, they may be the president of the Chartered College of Teaching. But in their head, they're just servants, man. They're like exactly what you are, really. You're just a servant, and not in a kind of, weird, Hollywood way. But the fact that in their minds, they're there to serve other people. They share the power. They put other people first. And their role every day in their heads is just to help other people kind of shine.
Mm-hmm.
So that comes from listening, the obvious stuff of kind of seeking first to understand before you then try to be understood. I've been reading as well about these things called belonging cues.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like tiny little language and body, I guess, stuff that we do that either gives out this idea that you belong or not. and that's a really fascinating subject.
Mm.
I was talking to someone recently who, and this is very common in schools, isn't it? This idea of taking on the hard tasks as a leader.
Yeah.
Their example was, I have the top set and the bottom set when we do the timetable, you know.
Okay.
And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. We could talk about it all day. But it was just interesting to me that that was a purposeful decision for them, you know. It wasn't some sort of, and it was interesting. It stuck in my mind because they didn't say, I take on all the challenging classes.
Mm.
There was a little bit of selfishness in there. They're like, I want the top set and I want the bottom set.
Fair
And I
enough.
thought, that's interesting, you know. And then if you read any of Simon Sinek's stuff, that Leaders Eat Last book talks a bit about leaders provide cover from above.
Yeah.
You know, this idea that if you're a leader, you are to serve the needs of your people, protecting them from any harm or prejudice all around.
Yeah.
So that was what I was thinking kind of when I made it. But why did it resonate with you?
I love it. I love this one as well. Your point around kind of like leaders that like, I think of the umbrella, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, when you're the head teacher, the umbrella from all the stuff that's going on outside, and you shelter your teachers so that they can do a good job of their job. And it's very similar in a trust. I think when you're a trust leader, you need an even bigger umbrella.
Yeah.
And your umbrella is, you're there. Absolutely, the servant mindset of a trust leadership team is so crucial, I think, because your job is to make the head teacher's jobs as easy as possible. Right? And it's not being a head teacher is never ever going to be easy, but we're there for exactly that reason. What can we do that will make things easier for you to do your job really well? Because that's what's going to impact the teachers and the children ultimately. So yeah, I love it. I just love this one. I love the idea of deliberate delegation and treat people like stars and they become stars, and you can do that thing now. I do feel like there's sometimes a difference between, if someone said to me, I think you could do that job, and I said, oh, I'm not sure, and they said, yeah, you could, I'd probably do it. Some people don't want to do it.
Sure.
And that's and I have to be really careful of that as a leader myself when I say, of course you can. You can definitely deliver that inset day, or you can definitely do whatever. And sometimes people really don't.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that I'm really careful and conscious of watching for that. But, people have given me great opportunities in my career, and it's our responsibility to give it to other people. Like, the space at the top for everybody, not that I'm at the top of anything, but, the space in the leadership level for everybody to do good things. And the other thing that you've got to remember is you don't know everything.
God, no.
So there will be people who know much more about things than you. So people would much rather hear from them than hear from me about things. It just feels like good leadership, but definitely the servant leadership thing. I think particularly in this profession, that is literally what we're here for.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
It's funny, isn't it? And I've been presenting to some people recently about the complexities of leadership, because it almost feels like every time you say, do this, there's always a counter argument about just pulling back a little bit. I feel like I'm getting bored of telling everybody that everything's on a continuum, and it kind of stands the test of time, because I was just going through my mind then. I was doing a presentation with some people the other day about poor proxies for leadership, because instantly, if you speak to lots of staff, what do you want from a leader? They need to be visible. And in their minds, that there's visibility. And of course, you get the two extremes then, don't you? Like walking around the school all day, but no strategic vision, no contracts signed, no all that sort of stuff. And then you get someone who's never seen. But it feels a little bit like that, this idea of shifting the spotlight all the time. There's probably a sweet spot about that in there. You want to do enough that you've got credibility. I can hear the kind of negative people like, what do they even do?
Yeah.
All they ever do is just give it to other people.
Yeah. It's probably about being attuned with like what your team needs, though, isn't it? Or being attuned with whatever level of organisation you work with. They need different things at different times.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you need the leader to stand up and be like, I'm the umbrella, I've got this. I've got you all.
Yeah.
I've got you. We're a team.
Yeah.
I've got this. We're good. We're under the umbrella. Sometimes you need like you hold the umbrella for a bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Oh
it's pretty
man,
true.
so that umbrella thing's hilarious. I was just thinking back to the fact that I still haven't learned my lesson about buying high quality umbrellas. I still buy the cheapest umbrella.
You
I
need one good umbrella.
I know. I keep buying like the 2 for £7 thing, and then I'm surprised when they bend and then they snap, and I'm like, oh goodness, hilarious. Right
Yeah.
then, let's keep pushing on. So your second ignition point is an interesting one, and we joked offline about the fact that in a last minute tweak to this, it's no longer going to be about all the bad people that you've worked with.
Probably best.
Because of employment, status. But there is something about the things that you've learned from where you've been exposed to negative leadership. Is that right?
Right. So it's probably different leadership styles and realizing what kind of leadership style you don't want to have.
Right.
And you probably only realize that by seeing it, maybe. But also realizing that just because you're a leader or just because somebody is your leader doesn't mean that they're necessarily always right.
Right.
And that you still have something to offer, even if it doesn't quite fit with their mold of doing something. I think it's quite tricky. It's quite a tricky one to talk about, but I do think working in or for people who perhaps don't fit with the style that you would want to have if you were in that position doesn't feel like a ignition point at the time, does it? For sure, it feels hard and challenging, and it challenges, depending on whatever's going on in your career at that time. But looking back, it probably does teach you quite a lot.
Yeah.
About kind of the kind of leader you want to be, the kind of place you want to work in. And I've worked in all the places I've worked in my whole career have been brilliant. Some of them have felt a better fit for the person that I am than not. That doesn't mean necessarily that they were bad or that they weren't doing a good job of their job. It just wasn't right for me. And I think when you realize that, and if you're in a very lucky position where you can be like slightly picky about where you work and you can think very carefully before you move, it's pretty joyful.
Yeah.
So because you get yourself, my current trust, I absolutely love it. We were talking offline a bit just now about that kind of thing about, I know I'm not in my working hours now, but this piece of work really, really important to this school, to this teacher. And actually, I just want to spend my 2 hours of my Saturday doing it. Yeah. And that's pretty joyful, isn't it? I think it is a Simon Sinek quote that says something like, hard work when you don't want to do it, for someone who, you don't value, or for a reason you don't value, is stress. Yeah. But hard work when you do want to do it and you're committed to whatever the bigger picture is passion. And it's a bit cheesy, isn't it? But it is really true. Yeah. And it's a real privilege if you can get yourself into that in your, like, it's what you'd want for your kids, right? You'd want your kids to be in a job where they thought, of course it's a job, and some days on a Monday morning you don't want to get up, but actually you love it because it's doing whatever floats your boat. And certainly for me, what floats my boat, maybe not forever, but definitely at the moment, as through my career, is doing a really, really, really good job for these children. And that's kind of panned out to doing a really, really good job for teachers.
Yeah.
And so for the charter college role, that is absolutely it. Like, teachers are, I try not to say teachers are like superheroes, because that has some connotation that they have to have some kind of superpower, but they are pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
And we've got to really support and champion them like a teacher does for the children. So that's where I'm at.
Have you got any on the tip of your tongue things that you have learned, like when you were going through these leaders where you thought, oh, that's not quite how I would do it? What were you writing down? Like, when I become a leader, I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah. So I did have a go at thinking about those things in a kind of reasonably politically correct, could be on a podcast kind of way. But I think very much like it ties in with the launch pads that we've looked at. Like, compassionate leadership for me is really, really important. I want people to, I obviously want high standards for everybody, but I want us to do it together and get there together. I certainly don't want to just like force people to do stuff or make people feel bad for whatever reason, not valued or whatever it is along the way. So that's really important for me. The culture of we're doing things together because this is the right reason is really, really important.
Right.
So yeah, that's an important one for me. And actually, I really hate upsetting people, so I would much prefer it if we could do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, we're coming close to the end now, but we've got your last Fast Friends question, which you chose. When did you last cry in front of another person? So hopefully it's not going to be now, but yeah, tell me about the last time.
It's not going to be now, so that's good. I am pretty good at not crying in professional situations.
Okay.
However, when Jade Pierce did her podcast, and we read a little bit, she said, absolutely, I don't cry. It's a waste of time, you know, and honestly, I aspire to be more Jade. However, I cry all the time.
Yeah.
Literally all the time. I don't cry at work generally, but I cry when I'm sad, but I cry when I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
I cry when things are unfair.
Right.
You know, so it's just, yeah, my husband is absolutely brilliant. He can tell the difference between like, this is just a frustrated cry and she just needs to get it out. And this is actually I need to try and help her with this, solve this problem cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to worry about it, but I don't worry about it anymore. I'm like, it's just what I'm like.
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that talks back to maybe, is your husband in education?
No, he's not.
Is he a leader though?
He is, yeah. He runs his own business, so he's.
Right. I was just thinking about that. You know, some in the first kind of launchpad, we talked about knowing your staff, didn't we? And there's a little bit in there, isn't it, about knowing your staff well enough to be able to pick up on what kind of emotion is this?
Yeah.
What do they need from me in this moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That is. I mean, that's a huge thing because sometimes I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but sometimes it's just this is so frustrating, or this is so unfair, or you know, I've dealt with this really difficult safeguarding case, and it's just and you know, sometimes there's no answer. It's just get it out. But really strongly, I feel like I used to worry about it, hide it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sobbing in meetings. I can stop that. But now I'm like, oh, I just need to get it out.
Yeah. I feel like I mean, every time this question comes up, I probably say the same stories, but I feel like I'm doing a good job in front of my my boy because I cry all the time in front of him to sort of just, you know, normalize it, I suppose. And usually it's things like if I feel proud of someone else, for some reason, that's a real trigger for me.
Yeah.
And really randomly, when this will come out, but if people are looking for something to randomly watch on or to Google, I had a little cry this morning when I was watching this thing on YouTube called the Barkley Marathons.
Yep. Seen that.
This crazy like challenge. And
Yeah.
the video was about the first woman to have ever completed the Barkley Marathons.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all very well scripted. But this lady, after a 60-hour 100-mile race, 60 hours, she finished at 59 minutes.
Wow.
30 seconds or something crazy like that. And she's the first woman to ever complete it. And I mean, they did a good job of stitching it together because there's a flashback video to 2014 where the guy who created it says no woman will ever complete the Barkley Marathons. And he goes, because they're just not strong enough. And of course, it all built up, and I was just like, she's going to do it. You know, and she's crawling toward the line sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's like, it's getting involved in other people's emotions, though, isn't it? Like, you don't even know this woman, but like, you're there with her.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I knew it would be. This has been an absolute joy. How can people connect with you and your work and all that sort of stuff?
So, LinkedIn is good.
Yep.
Don't really do X anymore. But yeah, LinkedIn is a good way to connect with me. Lots of goodness about the Charter College. Anybody who's not a member, definitely check it out. It's 100% worth it. mostly for me because they are a brilliant voice for the profession and teachers and all of the brilliant things that teachers really, really do, which it's very cheesy, but literally is changing lives.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good. Small school stuff, I run a small school WhatsApp group. If there are small school heads out there who are feeling isolated, as you often are, if you're a small school in a rural community somewhere, get in touch, find me on LinkedIn. We'll add you into that group. Lots of leaders there. They deal with really interesting challenges with things like there's a sheep stuck in the hedge. What should I do? So like, I've got an offset inspection tomorrow. Can you help me with this thing? So that's pretty good. So yeah, always happy to help. I think that's probably my strap line.
And you haven't spoken about the book yet?
I haven't spoken about the book. No, the book's good. Really proud of it, but it's definitely not my work. It is certainly the work of all of the authors of the different chapters who've got some really, really interesting stuff that's going on in their small schools. Really, really good. So the book came about because I was speaking. I try not to say yes to speaking things, but I was speaking at the Church of England conference, I think, and Mary Myatt happened to be in the audience. I mean, who even needs Mary Myatt in the audience? That's like, I think you're in the wrong one.
Yeah.
But she came up to me afterwards and she said, I think you've got something here. I think people need to hear this. You should write a book. So I'm very dyslexic, definitely could not write a book. So I just had this lovely time collecting together interviews of lots of other people who are doing brilliant things in their small schools and CEOs and diocesan leaders. And we put it all together into one book. So it's certainly not my work. I just chose the cover.
Amazing. Wow.
But yeah.
What a perfect way to end, in that you, obviously, even through the book, are amplifying the voices of others.
Hooray.
Check you out. Boom, boom.
Great.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll see you at the next one.
Great. Thanks, Chris.